He saved hostages abroad, but at home he was forgotten. A clerical error erased his pension and records. He lived in a cardboard box, starving on the streets. Arrested for stealing a sandwich, no one recognized the hero he once was. In court, he was treated like just another vagrant. This was how the country repaid the soldier who gave it everything. Unjust, or just? If it feels wrong to you, write down your opinion in the comments. The heat in Mosul had a way of swallowing sound. Dust hung thick over the rooftops as Staff Sergeant Leon Hargrave adjusted the scope on his rifle, one knee pressed against broken concrete. Below, through a shattered window, a woman cradled a child in her arms, her mouth covered with duct tape. Hostage. His intel had been right. 3 tangos inside, Leon whispered into his mic, visual on civvies. Proceeding on my mark. The breach team moved like shadows. That rescue, like dozens before it, ended without press, without ceremony. Leon didn't ask for credit. He asked for survival. For his men. For the civilians. That was enough. For 28 years, Leon served with unwavering focus. His best friend, Calvin Reyes, called him Machine Heart, not for a lack of emotion, but for the way he kept it buried until the mission was done. But Calvin was gone now. Killed in a roadside blast during a routine patrol in Syria. Leon had been just 6 feet behind him. He remembered the ringing in his ears, the way Calvin's body folded. He remembered holding his dog tags. He still had them. When Leon returned home for good, things had already changed. His small apartment in Jacksonville was gone, foreclosed while he was on duty due to missed paperwork. The landlord didn't return his calls. His VA contact had been reassigned. When he walked into the Veterans Affairs office with his discharge documents, they looked confused. Pension number. I gave it to the last agent. There's no record of any pension filed under your name. Leon stood still for a long moment, jaw tight. Check again. But they didn't. Or wouldn't. The woman behind the desk blinked blankly, fingers already moving to close his file. Her name tag read Shelley. He went back again. And again. Same answer. No file. No benefits. No medical support. Appeals. Rejected due to incomplete submission. No one asked about his injuries. The shrapnel still lodged in his hip. The shoulder that clicked every time he raised his arm. The ringing in his left ear. Leon spent 2 months couch surfing with a buddy from his old unit, but that couldn't last forever. Eventually, he found himself alone, standing in line at the public shelter with men who stared at the floor and women who muttered to themselves. He wore his best clothes, old camo pants, a black windbreaker, boots polished from memory. The dog tags in his pocket felt heavier each day. One night, sitting on the floor of the shelter next to a man muttering about aliens, Leon looked down at his hands. They didn't feel like his anymore. Not the hands that once carried wounded men over stone walls. Not the hands that defused bombs, loaded weapons, lifted crying children from rubble. They trembled now. Cold. Thin. Forgotten. His only anchor was a photo of Calvin, folded into his wallet. They'd taken it after a mission in Mali, both men grinning, dirt-caked and alive. It reminded Leon of a promise they'd made, sitting on a rooftop after that op. If we make it through all this, Calvin had said, lighting a cigarette, you gotta promise me one thing. What's that? You'll live. I'm not planning on dying, Leon replied. No, Calvin said, staring at the night sky, I mean after. When we come home and they forget us. When we don't know where we belong. You keep living. Promise me. Leon had promised. But now, in the silence of the city that once called him hero, that promise felt like a cruel joke. He tried to fight it. He wrote letters. He visited offices. He called hotlines. Every door was a wall. Every wall had a lock. And he had no key. Some battles end with medals. Others end with silence. By early winter, Leon had stopped checking the mailbox at the shelter. It only brought bills meant for someone else or envelopes marked, return to sender. His name didn't seem to exist anymore, not in the pension database, not at the VA, not in any of the files he once trusted. Whatever proof of his life had once lived in the system had been eaten by time, error, or indifference. He wasn't dead. Just misplaced. So he moved through the city like a ghost. Mornings began on the church steps at 5th and Garrison. He'd watch the buses hiss by, each full of people who didn't see him. Or worse, saw him and turned their heads. He wore layers, a thermal shirt beneath a faded army sweatshirt, Calvin's old jacket zipped over it all. In his left pocket, a folded napkin, a paperclip, and the dog tags. In the right, a single crumpled dollar bill, untouched for days. When the shelter overflowed, he slept in a cardboard box beside a bakery dumpster. The smell of yeast and sugar filled the air. Once, the owner tossed him a bag of day-old pastries without a word. Leon muttered a thank you and gave the bag to a woman sleeping 2 boxes down. She had 2 kids with her. He hadn't seen them before. Leon took odd jobs when he could. Cleaning alleys. Carrying bricks at a construction site until his shoulder gave out. Sweeping sidewalks in front of pawn shops that wouldn't buy anything from him. But work was drying up, and so was his strength. One afternoon, as sleet swept through the streets, he wandered into a gas station convenience store and asked if he could mop the floors. The clerk, barely 20, looked him over and said, "We're good." Leon nodded and left. Pride stung more than cold. He never begged. Not once. When a teenager tossed him $1 on the subway platform, Leon didn't move. He let it sit between his boots. The boy's girlfriend whispered something and they both laughed. Leon's hand clenched inside his coat pocket. Not from rage, from something sadder. A long ache in the bones. He wasn't angry at them. They didn't know. He just hated what he'd become, a man judged by a beard grown too long, boots worn too thin, eyes too tired to meet anyone's. On Wednesdays, a church van served hot soup downtown. Father Delgado always greeted Leon with a handshake and a smile that didn't pity. "You still carrying those tags?" the priest once asked. "Every day." "Good. Some things should be remembered." Leon didn't answer. He took his soup in a styrofoam bowl, sat on the curb, and watched people walk by. His seat faced a billboard with a new ad every week. This time it read, "Heroes don't always wear capes." He let out a breath and laughed under his scarf. One morning, a little girl at the bus stop across from the shelter walked over while her mom wasn't looking. She held out half a peanut butter sandwich. Leon blinked, surprised. "That for me?" She nodded. "You look hungry." He opened his mouth to decline, but the words stuck. "Thank you," he said quietly, taking the sandwich with both hands. When he looked up, the mother was watching. She didn't smile, didn't scold her daughter. She simply nodded to Leon once, solemnly, before leading the child away. Nights were the worst. Cold wind cut through fabric like knives. His hip ached from old shrapnel. His thoughts wandered, not just to war, but to silence. He remembered missions where his presence changed the course of a family's life. He remembered a child holding his hand after being pulled from rubble. Now, no one reached for him. No flags. No welcome. No paycheck. He hadn't vanished. He'd simply become invisible. It happened on a Tuesday. Leon had gone 2 days without food. He'd stretched the last of the peanut butter crackers someone left at the shelter, but the nausea had returned. A gnawing ache in his stomach that made standing difficult, and thinking worse. He waited outside the supermarket on Elm and 14th, watching through the glass as people carried baskets brimming with food he could name by scent alone. Rotisserie chicken. Rye bread. Sharp cheddar. A deli worker sprayed down a countertop, humming along to the music overhead. Inside, the lights were warm. The kind of warmth he hadn't felt in weeks. He stepped in slowly, boots squeaking against the polished tile. No one looked twice. A prepackaged ham and cheese sandwich sat in a cold tray by the door. $4.49, his hand hesitated above it. He glanced around. A man in a suit stared into his phone. A woman scolded her toddler by the milk fridge. No eyes on him. He didn't run. Didn't rush. He slipped the sandwich into his coat pocket like a man who didn't care if he was caught. And he didn't. The beep of the sensor was louder than he expected. "Sir." Leon turned as the security guard approached. Late 20s. Hair shaved close to the scalp. Not aggressive, just tired. "I'm going to need you to come with me." Leon nodded and held out the sandwich. "I was going to eat it outside." "Did you pay for it?" "No." The men didn't pull cuffs. He just motioned toward the back room. They sat across from each other in a cramped office with a dusty computer and a stack of unpaid invoices. A fluorescent light flickered overhead. Name: Leon Hargrave. The guard typed slowly, then glanced up. "You were Army." Leon blinked. "What?" "The tattoo on your forearm." "Unit code." "I was in the 10th myself." "Kandahar." Leon said nothing. The guard squinted. "You said Hargrave." He paused. There was a Hargrave in the hostage rescue unit in Fallujah. They gave him a medal. Silver Star or something. Leon didn't answer. The guard stared for a second longer, then hit a few more keys. "Doesn't matter." Stores pressing charges. At the precinct, they processed him like any other thief. Mugshot. Fingerprints. A holding cell that smelled like bleach and piss. He didn't resist. Didn't argue. Just sat on the bench, hands folded in his lap. An officer came to read him the charges. Petty theft under $500. Court appearance scheduled for Friday. "You'll be transported." Leon nodded. Then the officer noticed the dog tags, still hanging beneath his sweatshirt. She leaned closer. "Where'd you get those?" "They're mine." She lifted them gently with one gloved hand, reading the faded engraving. Hargrave, Leon M., O.Neg., U.S. Army, SSN redacted. She looked at him again. Eyes narrowed. "This real?" Leon met her gaze. "Is hunger real?" She straightened. "I'm gonna run something." He watched her leave the room without another word. Back in the cell, Leon sat alone. The sandwich had been thrown away. He hadn't eaten, but he'd never planned to, not really. He hadn't stolen it to survive. Not just that. He'd done it because something inside him needed to be seen. Even if only in the harsh light of a surveillance camera. Even if only in handcuffs. I wasn't stealing. I was surviving. Friday came gray and wet. Rain tapped the courthouse windows like restless fingers. Inside, the waiting area smelled of damp coats and cleaning fluid. Leon sat alone on the bench near courtroom 2B, dressed in the same clothes he'd been arrested in. They let him wash up at the precinct, gave him a brown paper bag with a granola bar and a pair of socks. He'd saved the bar. The door creaked open. Hargrave, Leon. He stood. His knees popped. His back ached. But he stood straight. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with quiet chatter. Lawyers shuffled papers. A young public defender with hollow eyes gave Leon a brief nod as he approached the defense table. Petty theft, the judge said, flipping through the file. Supermarket. Sandwich. Prior convictions, none. Employment, none. Pension, unclear. The prosecutor, a woman with a stiff voice, stood. Your Honor, the defendant was caught with the item on his person. Surveillance confirms the theft. We're asking for a fine and probation. The public defender leaned in. If you plead guilty, you'll just pay a fee and walk out. Leon's jaw tightened. I'm not pleading guilty. The judge looked up. Then we proceed. Halfway through the hearing, the back door opened with a whisper. A woman entered, late 40s, glasses, holding a folder tightly to her chest. She stood near the back, eyes locked on Leon. She whispered something to the bailiff. Moments later, she approached the bench. Your Honor, may I speak? The judge raised a brow. Who are you? Danielle Ortiz, Veterans Affairs Records Office. The judge gestured. Approach. She handed over the folder. The courtroom fell silent as pages turned. Medals. Photos. Reports. Service years. Missions. Injuries. A Silver Star citation. A Purple Heart. Deployment orders with Leon Hargrave's name on every one. The judge looked up slowly. Staff Sergeant Hargrave. Leon blinked. Yes, sir. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably. Ms. Ortiz stepped forward. Sir, we found his file. It had been misfiled under Hargrave with a D. I saw his name on the docket this morning and cross-referenced it myself. This man served 30 years. Hostage rescue, Afghanistan, Syria. His pension and medical records were never activated due to our error. She paused, her voice trembling. He should have been receiving full benefits since 2016. A low murmur filled the room. Someone in the gallery stood up, a man in uniform. Then sat back down, eyes wide. The judge set the file down gently. Mr. Hargrave, why didn't you tell us? Leon's voice came steady. I did. No one listened. The judge leaned back, looking at him differently now, not like a thief, but like a story that had been waiting too long to be told. Court will recess for review of this documentation, he said, but no one moved. The silence held. Then the young public defender stood and spoke softly, Your Honor, permission to submit a motion for dismissal based on clerical injustice. Granted. Danielle Ortiz approached Leon, eyes glossy. I'm so sorry. Leon gave a half-shrug. You're the first one who looked. She hesitated. Then reached into her purse and handed him a laminated photo, two civilians, dusty and wide-eyed, being pulled from rubble by a soldier. You saved them. That's you, right? He stared at the photo. He hadn't seen that image in years. Calvin had taken it. Leon nodded once. The judge returned to the bench. Case dismissed. Full benefits to be reinstated retroactively. Mr. Hargrave, you are free to go. Leon didn't smile. He didn't cheer. He just whispered, thank you. But behind him, someone in the audience stood. Then another. A quiet ripple of movement. No applause. Just respect. A single soldier raised a hand in salute. You are not invisible here, Staff Sergeant. The story broke that evening. A local reporter covering courthouse activity had posted a short clip from the hearing, Leon, gaunt and stone-faced, standing silently as his long-lost service record was read aloud in court. The headline read, Veteran arrested for sandwich theft had Silver Star. Government lost his file. By morning, it had gone national. Calls poured into the VA, senators issued statements. One even called Leon's story a catastrophic betrayal of duty to those who served. But Leon didn't watch the news. He was still at the shelter, curled up in a cot near the window, unsure what to feel. Danielle Ortiz found him there. They want you in D.C., she said, breathless. A congressional committee. Public apology. National coverage. You name it. Leon shook his head. I don't want cameras. I just want my check and my doctor. She laughed softly. You'll get both. And more. The following week, Leon met with an attorney from the Veterans Legal Initiative. We're filing for restitution, she explained. Back pay, compensation for missed care, and potential damages. But this is more than about money. Leon looked at her. Is it? You were left to rot. We're making sure the country knows it. He didn't answer, just studied his hands. The tremble was still there, not from hunger now, but habit. 2 days later, he walked into a VA clinic for the first time in years. Clean hallways. Efficient nurses. A doctor with kind eyes and a quiet voice who called him Staff Sergeant and meant it. Blood work. X-rays. An MRI on his hip. Anti-inflammatories. New glasses. A hot meal in the waiting room, no questions asked. As he left the clinic, an orderly walked up, eyes wide. You're Leon Hargrave, right? Leon nodded. My uncle served with you in Mosul. You saved his squad. Leon paused. What was his name? Reed. Private First Class. Called you Iron Ghost. Leon let out a short breath. Reed, yeah. He was a good kid. He said you never talked much. Just did the job. Thank you. The young man held out his hand. Leon took it. Back in court 2 weeks later, Leon wore a clean suit, borrowed from a veterans outreach program. His beard was trimmed. His boots, polished. The judge readdressed the case for official record. His attorney spoke first. Your Honor, the prosecution's original argument centered on theft. But the real theft was from my client, a theft of dignity, identity, and time. Mr. Hargrave didn't steal food out of greed. He stole it because the system forgot him. She paused. Because we forgot him. The room was packed. Not just with press, but with soldiers, men and women from different branches, old and young, in uniform and out. Some had traveled across state lines just to be there. The judge, visibly moved, turned to Leon. Do you have anything to say, Mr. Hargrave? Leon stood slowly. I served 30 years. I saw things I don't talk about. I buried friends. I watched a country rebuild itself from the rubble. But when I came home, I didn't get a parade. I got paperwork. He glanced at the gallery. I didn't come here today for revenge. I came because silence doesn't work anymore. And maybe if someone hears this, maybe the next guy won't have to wait so long. The room was quiet. Not out of awkwardness, out of reverence. No applause. Just the steady sound of breathing. Then a rustle, the youngest soldier in the room stood, heels clicking together, and saluted. Others followed. One by one. No commands. No orders. Just quiet honor. The wind in Patterson Park no longer cut like a blade. It was early March, and for the first time in years, Leon Hargrave didn't have to count minutes until the shelter opened or find a place to sleep before the cold turned dangerous. The city was still loud, still indifferent in many ways, but now he had a roof, a room, and a name again. He sat on a park bench just after sunrise, wearing a clean coat provided by the VA. His boots were polished. His beard was trimmed. And in his hand was a cup of real coffee, hot, strong, and his. The war memorial stood across from him, a silent stone soldier frozen mid-stride. Leon had visited this spot every day since they'd moved him into his permanent housing just a few blocks away. It wasn't habit anymore. It was ritual. A quiet check-in with memories that never truly left. He reached into his inner pocket and pulled out the familiar shape of Calvin's dog tags. Cold. Steady. Still with him. The sound of footsteps behind him made him turn. Uncle Leon. He stood slowly. That voice, he hadn't heard it in over a decade. Janine. She looked older, yes, but she had the same eyes as her mother, Leon's sister, and the same warmth in her voice. Her coat flapped in the wind, one hand clutching her purse, the other holding a small, framed photo. He swallowed hard. You found me. I never stopped looking. She stepped forward, wrapped her arms around him, and for a long time, Leon didn't move. Then, slowly, he hugged her back, his chin resting on her shoulder. When they sat down, she handed him the photo. It was a Christmas picture from years ago, Leon in dress uniform, his late wife Marie standing beside him, smiling wide. Behind them, Calvin and his wife laughing just out of frame. The frame had a small crack in one corner but was otherwise clean, well kept. She wanted you to have this, Janine said softly. Mom kept it in her kitchen till she passed. Said you'd come home one day. Leon traced Marie's face with his thumb. I thought I'd lost this forever. Janine nodded. You didn't lose it. You just got delayed. A week later, the city council hosted a private recognition event at Patterson Park. No media. No press kits. Just a handful of veterans, local officials, and a few people from Leon's past. He didn't want applause. He didn't want pity. What he got was respect. The mayor, a former Navy corpsman, gave a short speech and then stepped aside as two young soldiers unveiled a bronze plaque mounted at the base of the memorial. It read, "In honor of those who were forgotten and chose to rise anyway." Leon stood before it in silence, his hands behind his back. A light breeze tugged at his coat. Behind him, the city hummed as usual. Cars, dogs, voices. But here, in this moment, time paused. Someone saluted. Others followed. Not out of obligation. Out of recognition. That night, Leon returned to his new apartment, small, warm, his. The kitchen light glowed gold. The floor creaked in honest, familiar ways. He hung the photo of Marie and Calvin above his bed, next to his medals and the folded flag from his final deployment. He unpacked the last box. Inside was a tattered notebook, his old field journal, kept through dozens of missions. The pages were yellowed, but the ink held. Notes on troop movements. Rations. Letters never sent. The final page had always been blank. Until now. He picked up a pen and wrote slowly, in firm print. Still here. Then he folded the journal shut, placed it in the drawer beside his bed, and turned off the light. Later, he sat by the window and looked out at the quiet street. A child rode by on a bike, parents following. A street lamp flickered. Somewhere, a radio played faint jazz through a cracked window. He placed his hand on his chest, fingers brushing the medal he'd been given at the ceremony, not a replacement for anything he'd lost, but a reminder of what he still carried. He reached for the dog tags. Then the photo of Marie. Then the framed message from the court's dismissal, which he'd hung by the door. "You are not invisible here, Staff Sergeant." Leon smiled faintly. Not bitter. Not broken. Just at peace. "I found my way back. Just like you promised."